Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you are an exhausted parent running on nothing but cold coffee and pure willpower because your kid just will not sleep, I want to completely validate your struggle right now. Nighttime awakenings and bedtime resistance, they are honestly some of the absolute toughest parts of parenting. But what if I told you these disruptions aren't just your child being difficult? Today, our goal is to decode bedtime fears at every single developmental stage so you can finally understand exactly what's keeping them, and let's be real, you awake at night. Seriously, think about this for a second. Why does a 4-year-old fear a monster in the closet, while a 14-year-old lies awake just totally paralyzed by the fear of tomorrow's math test? It's a fascinating contrast, right? Well, bedtime fears aren't random. They are a direct, totally predictable byproduct of your child's cognitive development. As their brain matures, their capacity to imagine, anticipate, and worry evolves, and that completely rewires the landscape of what scares them in the dark. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll map out the bedtime fear timeline. Second, we'll dive into those imaginary toddler threats. Third, we'll cover school age and teen worry. Fourth, we'll build some nighttime routines that actually work. And finally, we'll talk about when it's time to seek clinical help. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the bedtime fear timeline, and how we shift from the concrete to the abstract. When you lay it all out, you can see this wild shift from what's concrete to what's entirely abstract. Around ages 3 to 4, kids are totally dominated by imaginary fears. We're talking monsters and the dark. By 5 and 6, we see transitional fears pop up, like natural disasters or maybe a scary dog. But hit ages 7 to 9, and wow, fears become highly realistic, focusing on health or bodily harm. By ages 10 to 12, social evaluation and peer rejection completely take the spotlight. And then finally, by ages 13 to 18, teens are grappling with these massive, abstract, existential fears about the future. It's literally a complete evolution from what they can see in a dark room to what is entirely hypothetical. Moving right along to section 2, let's look at imaginary nighttime threats, or what happens when fantasy and reality start to leak into each other. There's this incredible landmark study by Merce and his colleagues, and the data is mind-blowing. A massive 74% of children ages 4 to 6 fear imaginary creatures, compared to a mere 5% by ages 10 to 12. I mean, that should provide some serious logical comfort for us parents. If your 4-year-old is absolutely convinced there is a goblin under the bed, this terrifying monster phase is incredibly normal. It's just driven by their pre-operational cognitive stage, where magical thinking makes those imaginary threats feel intensely real. And as the numbers show, it really does drastically fade over time. Now, because this fear is so common, we parents often adopt the exact wrong strategies. Okay, hear me out. Do not perform elaborate monster checks or spray monster spray around the bedroom. I know, it sounds super fun and creative, but it actually validates the threat. It basically tells your kid, yep, monsters are totally real and we need chemical warfare to stop them. Instead, you want to use graduated exposure to darkness. Gently teach them to talk back to the fear. Have them draw the monster and make it look silly. That kind of cognitive reframing, that builds long-term coping skills rather than a reliance on magic sprays. It is also absolutely vital at this age to understand the difference between nightmares and night terrors because you handle them very differently. Nightmares happen during REM sleep. Your child wakes up, they remember the terrifying dream, and they need your active comfort and a big hug. Night terrors, though, vastly different. These happen during deep non-REM sleep. Your child might scream, thrash around, even sit up with their eyes wide open, but they are not conscious. They won't remember a single thing in the morning. So for night terrors, whatever you do, don't shake them awake. Just make sure they are physically safe and quietly wait it out. Which brings us to section 3, school age to teens, worry, how we go from monsters to realistic threats. You know that peaceful, sleeping child we all desperately want at the end of the day? Yeah. Contrast that with the harsh reality of a preteen lying awake in bed, just staring at the clock at 9 p.m. As their cognitive abilities mature, so does their capacity for complex anxiety. A 12-year-old isn't checking the closet for a monster. They're stuck in rumination and worry loops. They're stressing over school performance, the fear of peer rejection, or even massive existential threats like global news events. And for teens, this shift can escalate into severe sleep schedule disruption. You'll see their fears really zoom in on social evaluation, academic failure, and complex, super-realistic nightmare themes. Often, this drives a truly devastating cycle of insomnia. Teens will actively use screens or stay up way too late just to intentionally avoid sleep because they're caught in this anxiety nightmare loop. Their brain literally starts to associate the dark, quiet bedroom not with rest, but with a flood of uncontrollable, stressful thoughts. All right, let's get into solutions. Section 4, Nighttime Routines That Work. Let's look at some evidence-based toolkits for us exhausted parents. If your kid is doing the classic curtain call, getting out of bed over and over and over again, you absolutely need the Bedtime Pass. This was pioneered by pediatric sleep specialist Dr. Craig Canapari, and it's a game changer for preschool to elementary kids. Here's the play. First, craft a physical pass together. Second, tell them they can redeem it exactly once per night for a brief request. A hug, a sip of water, whatever. Third, if they come out again without the pass, you return them silently to bed, zero interaction. And fourth, if they keep the pass unused all night, they get a small reward in the morning. It's brilliant because it empowers the child while keeping your interactions minimal, yet totally supportive. Now, if you're dealing with specific sleep disturbances, here are 2 highly effective clinical-grade techniques. For chronic nightmares, you want to use image rehearsal therapy, or IRT. During the daytime, sit down and actually help your child rewrite the nightmare script. Change the ending into something silly or triumphant and have them rehearse that new story before bed. For night terrors, the gold standard is anticipatory awakening. Let's say your child has a night terror every night like clockwork at 11 p.m. You gently wake them up 15 minutes prior at 10:45. This slightly disrupts their sleep cycle, and it effectively bypasses that deep sleep stage where the terror actually happens. Finally, Section 5, When to Seek Clinical Help. Let's distinguish those normal phases from actual clinical disorders. We have to be able to separate simple reassurance needs from real clinical indicators. Typical childhood fears are transient, right? You check the closet once, give them a hug, and it's solved. But with anxiety disorders, the fear is generalized. It causes panic attacks and manifests physically. We're talking severe stomach aches or headaches at bedtime. And then look at OCD. That involves intrusive thoughts managed by really time-consuming repetitive rituals. If your child's bedtime routine is stretching into hours of compulsive checking and they are highly distressed, we are definitely no longer dealing with just a phase. But here is the good news. If your child is dealing with clinical anxiety or OCD, specialized therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention, or ERP, are incredibly effective. ERP safely and systematically exposes the child to the trigger, like being in the dark room, while preventing the compulsive response, like having to flip the light switch 20 times. Working with a qualified therapist to implement these tools equips your child with lifelong resilience. So let's wrap up this explainer with one final thought. Is your child's bedtime fear just a frustrating phase you have to grit your teeth and endure? Or is it a profound opportunity to build lifelong coping skills? Every monster under the bed, every worry about tomorrow's test, it's all a developmental milestone. By validating their emotions and bringing in these structured, evidence-based routines, you are literally teaching your kids how to confidently face the dark. Thank you so much for joining me, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring these tools to finally bring some peace back to your nights.